Hey everyone, welcome to Season 3, Episode 10 of the Senstennial podcast. Today, we got a bunch of topics lined up, as per usual. We have the Senators losing against Vancouver, but then bouncing back, beating both Carolina and Colorado, who are not slouch teams by any means, and how some of our players stacked up in those matches. We're going to talk about Dorion making comments to the media about the whole rebuild is over statement that he made earlier in the season, I believe prior to the season starting. We'll talk about whether Adam Gaudette deserves more of a shot in the lineup and whether Thomas Chabot should be someone who's considered for Team Canada at the upcoming Olympics. So let's just jump right into it, and we'll kick it off with the Sens losing against Vancouver by a pretty brutal game. It was like, 6-2? But they bounced back. They beat Carolina on the second half of the back-to-back, and then Saturday night, they almost give up the lead to lose, but they hold on and win in overtime. So, Bennett, we'll kick it off with you. What did you think about the last few games that the Sens have played here?
Yeah, it was a funny week. It started off with that 6-2 loss to the Canucks on Wednesday night, which, Ian Mendez mentioned one of his recent pieces was possibly the low point this season for the Sens, and I would probably agree. The Canucks, as evidenced by their moves in their front office and behind the bench this week, are also a team in crisis, and yet they looked like a top team against us on Wednesday, which they are not. They're right down at the bottom there with us, but they styled on us that night, which was pretty lame to see. But the Sens bounced back. They claimed two, high-valued scalps against Carolina, 3-2 on Thursday night, and then a really fun 6-5 overtime win against Colorado on Saturday. And I was at that game. The atmosphere was great. It was a really fun watch. Probably the most fun. It's only the third game I've been to this season, but by far the most fun atmosphere and the most fun I had watching it. And it was great to see, Stützle and Tkachuk both had 2 goals apiece in that win on Saturday. So that's some positive development. We want to keep that rolling. We want those guys to be in amongst the goals as much as possible, win or lose. And we saw a bit of that on Saturday night. So long may it continue.
What do you think, another Matt? How do you like or dislike the way that the last week went?
I couldn't have said it better myself if I had written it, Bennett. I think you hit a lot of the points that a lot of us kind of needed. After that Vancouver loss, desperation was setting in for the coaching staff, for the players, for front office. You can't lose that many games. You can't get blown out that many games and without a win, or at least looking like you have fight. And the games previous to that, they didn't have any. So being able to bounce back from the Vancouver win or Vancouver loss, and then beating Carolina, who's, cream of the crop in the NHL right now, and then beating Colorado team that's missing their number one. It's nice. So I think having that, it's given the players a little more confidence. It was great to see Stützle score 2 goals, get 3 points. Tkachuk getting 4 points, 2 goals. It was a good weekend for a lot of the players, and you hope to see those performances sort of keep happening. But I mean, if we are in tank mode, we can't win too many games. So I also think we'll probably, lose tonight's game maybe. As long as we're just in games, our players are performing and going from there. It was nice to see Forsberg steal a game against Carolina, but he was not the difference maker against Colorado. That's for sure. I am surprised he's getting the start tonight.
Yeah. I'm thinking that they're just rolling with Forsberg because even though he hasn't well, he didn't play well last game. I think it's just like the team won with him playing. So we're just going to play him again. And then Gus will get to come in against a super struggling Islanders team. And I will be at that game. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, I think that's probably why they went with that decision. But I agree. I'm surprised they didn't do Gus then Forsberg. But I guess DJ's rolling with the guy who's getting wins right now. Forsberg's gotten 2 wins in the last 2 games. So going to try him out. See how it goes. Hopefully he puts up a brick wall like he did against Toronto and Carolina.
Yeah. Having goalies do their job is important. Against Colorado, Forsberg was a little lackluster, but we still got the win. You're probably going to see, if he loses tonight's game, then they'll go back to Gus. I think Gus has been the better goalie of the 3 that we've had all season, but play what you can get and sort of go from there. We'll see what the next couple of games brings, but go Sens go, I guess.
All right, so then
that should be A, the motto for this season, and B, the title of this episode. Go Sens go, I guess? Question mark.
Okay, well, we'll go on to the rebuild being over comments that Dorion kind of backpedaled on. And I know we've spoken about this before, and I think we all believe to some degree that it was a little bit exaggerated by a lot of fans on what that actually meant. So Dorion comes out and basically corrects that and basically says that he shouldn't have said it the way he did, and that he was a little too excited from the way last season ended. And, essentially trying to say that they expected more from the team, and that Colin White, Shane Pinto, and Clark Bishop being out hurt them. Now, you could put some question marks beside Colin White and Clark Bishop. I know Colin White has a lot of people who are in his corner. I definitely am too. I thought he would have a bounce back season, but injuries again have really cut into his ability to show management that he's really earning of that contract they gave him after his rookie season. So it's tough, but I think it's kind of funny that you're citing a player who's played 17 NHL games in Shane Pinto, Colin White, who has really struggled to really become more than just a third line center or third line right wing when he's been shifted there, and a guy who played like how many games for the Sens in a depth role? Like he played fine, but it's not like this guy is some fourth liner like Nick Bonino, for example, who is a guy who's just kind of made his way as being like a career third or fourth liner who's reliable, right? Like Clark Bishop's still so young and inexperienced. Like you can't really say that he'd be a huge needle mover. So I think it's just kind of odd. And I think that Dorion definitely needs to take a little bit more blame for the roster makeup this season. I think even with Shane Pinto in the lineup and Colin White, this team is maybe close to 500, maybe. Like, and even that, I'm like saying in my head, I'm like, it's rough. So anyway, I'll flip it over to you, other Matt, and you can talk about what you thought about Dorion's comments.
I think they were pretty empty. There wasn't a whole lot of substance to it. When you're citing Clark Bishop being a detriment, losing Clark Bishop being a detriment to your season, it just shows me you didn't do anything to improve your team in general. Colin White, I could see the argument. He is a defensively responsible player, so that could help in the all-in-all defensive game. I think he could have had the opportunity to play in a second line role if he was able to battle it out, but he got hurt way too quickly. So, and then Shane Pinto is a rookie. He, wasn't going to get the opportunity to play, especially after his injury now. So it sucks to see that happening, but how are you like holding the balance of your season on these 3 players? And, to me, it doesn't make sense. And then when he corrects himself saying like the pieces of the future are in place, they're not in place. Sanderson hasn't come to the team yet. And you could make the argument, yeah, he's in place by being a prospect, but like you're still miles away from being a cup contending team. You're missing a true number one center. You're missing, two top six forwards and a group of capable forwards in your bottom six. You're not seeing that. You have bad contracts on your back end with Delzato, with Zaitsev. These things shouldn't be a factor when your rebuild is over. And then he says, well, we're not going to be shipping off soon to be UFAs for picks now. And I say, whoa, hold on a second there. That's, something that you should be doing, because if they have no future with Ottawa, they need to be gone. And if you can get value for them, hell yeah, do that as soon as you possibly can. Like a guy like Dylan Gambrell isn't fitting into our lineup in the next 2 or 3 years. If you get a 7th round pick for him, you do that, no question. If somebody offers you a 3rd round pick for Adam Gaudette, you absolutely do that. You have to be smarter here. And whenever Dorion comes to the podium, he puts his foot in his mouth because he does things that don't really make sense. And also, I mean, it was a Saturday morning presser. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it sounds like basically every media that Ottawa fans appreciate weren't notified that it was happening. That's sketchy as hell. And so you don't have media asking questions that really get down to the meat and potatoes of the situation. And you just have, water carrier journalists being there, not asking hard-hitting questions. And, we get the same drivel. Ian Mendez had an amazing article, I believe, a week ago of the questions he would want to ask. And he says, do these seem unfair? Maybe a little bit, but they're justified. They are very hard-hitting questions, but you need to get to the bottom of what is going on. And we just have not seen that from Pierre Dorion and the front office in general.
Yeah, no, I think that was pretty well said, to be honest, but I'll let Bennett touch on it before I say anything else.
Yeah, not too much to add to that. I mean, a couple of my impressions, these comments were, I think, in many respects, too little, too late. They provided more mixed messaging from the organization, as well as more moved goalposts. I think that Dorion made the point that he was caught up in the emotion of last season when he made his comments in the off season, which struck me as strange because, it had been months since the end of the season. And then he only speaks to the media like 3 times a year, if that. So it's not like he was caught off guard or anything. Like, it wasn't an off the cuff moment. It was like a press release. So I think it was weird to kind of like say, oh, I got caught up in the emotion of it. It's like, well, you assembled this team and then, you were given a contract extension and you were asked to make some comments and stuff. It was kind of an unforced error on his part, if that is what he's getting at. I maintain that I think he put together a winning team and is surprised at how badly they're doing, which again is more of an indictment than, setting expectations too high. And I think his comments about some of the players underperforming, kind of blaming a little, in fairness, he said that the buck stops with him, which sure it does. But he did say, without naming names, that some players were underperforming. I've said this before. I don't agree. The players we have aren't good enough. We shouldn't be winning most games. We should be mostly losing because the talent isn't there. And to say that this team is underperforming is disingenuous, in my opinion. And finally, to get to the moved goalposts aspect, again, in Ian's piece in The Athletic, he made a great point about where Dorion said the team was going to be in a few years back in 2019. He was saying that, in the next 3 seasons, we'd be a basement team, then we'd be like pushing for a playoff spot, then we'd be in the playoffs, and then, we'd be contending for the playoffs. And we arguably have not progressed past stage one of that plan, despite the fact that, the expectation was that by now we would be at least in the playoffs and hoping to start to do damage. And as we've seen this season, we're miles from being at that stage. So yeah, I think it's just like a lot of mixed messaging, a lot of confusion, a lot of, it seems obvious to me that the front office is scrambling, that this has caught them by surprise. They were not expecting to be where they are. And again, as I've stated time and again in the last few weeks, that worries me far more than the fact that we're at the bottom of the league. I don't mind that. I'm patient. I take the L, take the high pick. I'm all for it. But the fact that they seem to be here by accident rather than on purpose definitely gives me some gray hairs.
Well, honestly, I think that just the team overperforming at the end of last season, like, it was a lot of fun to watch. But I think that gave management this, again, false belief that the team was better than they were. And we saw this when after they made it to the Eastern Conference Final, right? They went out and they traded for Duchesne. They're like, at first, the team played really well to start the season. Like, through the first month, I think they were playing fairly well. They had a couple of huge wins out west against Calgary and Edmonton. I think like 6-1 both games. They were looking on fire. And then the team started to struggle. And Dorion, instead of being like, okay, the team is struggling, like, maybe this isn't where we want. He's like, no, we just need one more piece to put us over the top, and made the Matt Duchesne trade. And I mean, thankfully, the trade in hindsight doesn't look as bad now as it did at the time. Shane Bowers is like the only player from the first round, I think, in 2017, or one of the very few who hasn't been an NHL player yet. The first round pick turned into Bowen Byram, who's really struggled with injuries and concussions, and that's awful. But just the fact of the matter is he hasn't really been an impact player yet. And Bowen Byram is really the only notable piece that came out of that trade from Ottawa. Turris has also fallen off a cliff. So, I mean, that was kind of a side tangent, but in general, it's another misevaluation of where the team is at. And then he goes in the offseason and the owner spills the beans that they're looking for a top 4 defenseman, top 6 forward. They don't do that. Now look where they end up. They're playing Stützle at center, which is fine. He's been Ottawa's best defensive forward analytically, which is great. I am more than happy with that. And he's looked very dangerous offensively. But you're putting him with 2 ideal third liners in Nick Paul and Connor Brown. I know last year Connor Brown had like 20 plus goals, and that's great. But ideally, you have him on your third line, and same with Nick Paul, ideally third or even fourth line. So I think having the talent having your depth players have to play up the lineup in roles where you'd have usually more skilled players has hurt the team. And then the total regression of players like Mete and even Josh Brown, who had I'm not the biggest Josh Brown fan, but he did have a good end to last season. Both those guys have regressed. And so it's just, and Zaitsev has even regressed from last season. Last season, he had okay defensive analytics. He's even regressed. So it's just a mess. And there's a lot of changes that have to come from the roster. And Dorion has to realize that he is the one who makes the personnel decisions. It can't be on the coach. The coach can't be telling him to trade for guys like Josh Brown or, similar players to Austin Watson, who I know scored the other night, but generally I find he doesn't add a ton to the lineup. And that might be an opinion that some people don't like, but I genuinely don't think he adds a ton other than maybe being a good locker room guy. But I think he needs to make better personnel decisions. And that's really my take on it. I know, other Matt, you were going to say something, so if you want to chime in, go for it.
Yeah. I mean, just to sort of finish that point off is it comes back to, them thinking they were going to be a better team and not doing anything to improve the team, just expecting it, to be better. And that's not a good thing. If you are a pro scout, you are a general manager, it's not a good thing. And Dorion has put his foot in his mouth several times. And, here we are yet again talking about how he's come up short whenever he's attempting to add a solid player that's been around the league, and it isn't amateur drafting. And so here we are. But I think one of the bigger takeaways from that presser is the fact that, media was not alerted about the fact that it was happening. We've seen plenty of credible reporters in Ottawa left out of the conversation. The Senators' PR didn't put out a notice, not even like an hour until it's happening notice, nothing at all. And the media that gets information from the team consistently knew about it, but the guys from The Athletic, Sylvain Saint-Laurent didn't get it. You're hearing this more and more often, and this is just coming after Elliot Friedman basically putting ownership on blast on Friday, essentially saying, like, I wouldn't be surprised if the league stepped in and said, you need to run things differently because this is not how an NHL team should be run. And that was pretty significant. I think one of the things that we totally forgot about is there were whispers that Melnyk was taking offers on the Sens. And all of this snowballed cumulatively to here. The NCC announcement, this ownership rumblings. You have this presser finally happening after months of being asked for it. It's all weird. I don't know what the heck is going on with the Sens, but having some sort of like pick and choose the media you let in because they carry the water for you and the others can't be there, that's not acceptable.
Yeah, and on top of that, you have media members, and just going to put this out there before I get into it, but Gord Wilson, who I think is a well-respected guy in the Senators media community, he went on TSN 1200 on the pregame before the Colorado game, and Sean Simpson was on there, and he was kind of like, yeah, everyone on Twitter seems to think that being a GM is easy, and then Sean Simpson, he was just kind of like, well, it's been 5 years, and like, what success has Dorion really brought to the table? Like, it's a results-oriented business, and he's not wrong. It is, and Dorion hasn't brought the results. Yes, I know he does scorched earth rebuild. I know that the team is still very young, with most of their core being under 25. That's definitely something to remember. But he was right, and Gord Wilson almost was upset that Sean Simpson was saying these things and was saying, at some point the narrative on the station has to change and Ottawa can't attract free agents. So he's like, on the top of the show, you guys are talking about bringing in Nazem Kadri and, why would he want to come to Ottawa and stuff? And it's like, whoa, like, why are you getting so defensive for Dorion? Like, yes, Dorion has done things that aren't awful, trading Derek Brassard and now having Gustafsson and Jacob Bernard Docker, getting both those guys out of that trade, like that was good. Like, in hindsight, that was good. And anyway, but you can't constantly hold water for him and just say, yeah, pat on the back, he's doing a good job. It's hard to be a GM. It's like, man, look at Benning out. He's not getting the results. Travis Green, Alain Vigneault, all these guys being fired. Marc Bergevin, like, teams who are underperforming are like, you know what, we got to shake things up. It doesn't matter about tenure. It doesn't matter about loyalty or whatever. Like, if it's not working, something has to change. And I'm not saying to blow up the entire front office or coaching, but you could make the argument for that, but something does need to change. And I'm not sure why some media members are so hell-bent on defending the organization when it's very evident that they should be further along than they are right now.
Yeah. The conversation has kind of passed by a little bit. I'll just add the clarification that, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think that the answers we received from Dorion on Saturday morning would have been substantially different whether, different media people were there than the people who were there. I mean, I'm under no illusion that, if if Ian Mendez or Sylvain Saint Laurent had been there, that they would have gotten Dorion to really spill the beans. I mean, no matter what questions they asked, we would have had the same answers. But that being said, I think both you guys are spot on with the state of things and how topsy-turvy it can be to be a Sens fan at times. Like in 1 week, the crazy highs, lows, and zigzags of ownership rumors mixed with beating Colorado on Saturday night, mixed with the weird press conference vibes, mixed with it's just such a weird maelstrom of like emotions and news and stuff. It's like we're missing another Melnick lawsuit to complete the bingo card, but then we would have had it all this week. Poor on ice performance mixed with big win, mixed with ownership, mixed with all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, the answer to your question, Matt, why can't we blow it up, is like we alluded to this in the last episode. We can't. We can't attract free agent talent here. We can't attract front office talent here. Who would we get that would agree to work with Melnick?
Jacques Martin, come on.
Who would we get to come in as GM with offering them a package of probably worse pay than they'd get at any of the other 31 teams in the league? With a fan coming into a fan base that are angry, coming into a situation where you have an owner who's reticent to spend money, knowing that you have a lackluster arena in like a smaller market than a lot of other teams in the league. It is not an attractive position, and when you know that you have an owner who likes to meddle, likes to put people on blast in the media, who's going to make your job difficult more often than he's going to make it easy. I don't see a situation where we can just get rid of Dorion and replace him with like someone good. Like the best we can get is they'll like promote somebody from within who is maybe slightly better, but still not like an actual real talent acquisition to take this team forward. This team only promotes from within, basically, when it comes to front office positions. So you're talking about a hiring pool of like 20 guys instead of when Montreal is looking to hire a new GM, where their hiring pool is everyone in the entire hockey world.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I think, honestly, speaking about Montreal, that Jeff Gordon hire was pretty savvy. And I know that they wanted a GM who's bilingual or French speaking, but to have Jeff Gordon like kind of pulling the hockey ops strings, that was a pretty savvy move. And immediately, you see him pick up Cale Clague off waivers. And he's a left-hand defenseman who has 5 assists through 11 games this season. He's 23 years old. He's almost like when the Sens picked up Mete off waivers last year. He's one of those guys who is definitely underrated and was only put on waivers because LA had Drew Doughty coming back to the lineup, and he was just the easy guy to put on waivers. And so, a pickup like that, honestly, Ottawa should have been all over that. I really think that Clague has the potential to be a solid top 4 guy. And, if the Sens are looking to upgrade on Mete, who was scratched last game, Clague has that capability to move the puck, and he's taller. And I know the Sens like guys that are taller and all that, right? So they don't like the small guys.
If DJ Smith had a Tinder bio, it would be like, don't message if not 6 feet kind of thing.
Yeah.
But on the coaching side, I agree with you. It's definitely a smaller pool that Ottawa can pick from. And, you basically have to get guys who are either coming up and trying to make a name for themselves in the league, like DJ Smith, hiring or promoting someone like Troy Mann. I could honestly see Troy Mann coming up from Belleville and being our next head coach. Like it seems so likely in my mind that is on the table. Not this season, but potentially next season. And then beyond that, like you look at coaches, it's either that or you have to get someone who's outside of the NHL who hasn't been in a while, like Guy Boucher. And Guy Boucher did a great job in his first season with the Sens, so I won't knock him on that. But again, he wasn't in the league anymore. He'd been out of the league for a little bit. So like, could the Senators get someone like Jacques Martin or Claude Julien? Alain Vigneault now out of a job. Travis Green.
No, I'm staying way far away from Alain Vigneault.
No, I totally understand, but I'm just saying, like, the guys that Ottawa has a choice of are guys who don't have a position in the league or are at a low in terms of where they're at as a coach, right? Anyway, I don't really know what else to add to that, but I'm just kind of agreeing with Bennett here. You basically are making budget hires or hiring from within, and it's hard to really get a coach. The Islanders, for example, they hire Barry Trotz. Immediately, he makes an impact, and they actually become a team that can contend in the playoffs. Unfortunately, they lose twice in Game 7s to Tampa Bay over the last couple of years, but they're right there, right? And this season they've struggled, but my point stands. You get a good coach, you see results. So I'll leave it there. I don't want to ramble too long. I know that we're kind of running short on time, so maybe we'll kind of skip Adam Gaudette and
we could just say, do you think Adam Gaudette should be in the lineup over guys like Austin Watson, Dylan Gambrell, and a bunch of other bums? Absolutely. Like, the guy had 30 points on the Canucks in a shortened season. Canucks fans really liked him. Chicago fans apparently really liked him. I think he has a greater ability to be like one of the pieces you could move could move ahead with over, I don't know about you guys, but Austin Watson has not played well really at all this season. Even his fighting is pretty mediocre. I think he's lost his last 7, in the fight categories that people have him doing them in. But the fact stands is that Adam Gaudette can score. He can do quite a few things. Yeah, he had a bad defensive game, but give the guy a chance to maybe explore what you have in this player, because you made the claim for a reason, and so do something with it.
Yeah, give him a look. I mean, like you say, Austin Watson is just getting his shit kicked in this year. He's got 1 point. He's a -5. His Corsi is 34.8%. As you said, Gaudette did not have a great defensive game in his debut against the Canucks, but he did get a nice goal. So you know what? Fuck it. We've said before, listen, I don't care about how the team does in the standings this year. As long as we're seeing some growth and some positive signs, and we're seeing the needle move on where this roster, the direction that this roster is going in, then I'm happy. So if you throw Gaudette in there, he chips in with some points here and there, and he, helps make this team a little bit better. If we're still losing games, I'm not fussed about it.
Yeah. And all right, well, let's touch on the last thing for today, and it's Thomas Chabot. And should he be chosen by Team Canada this year for the Olympics? And Ben, I know you had a list of the current defensemen, so did you want to just read those off, and then we can kind of say where we think Chabot stacks up or fits in there?
For sure, yeah. And obviously, the all Team Canada lineups are prospective right now. I think they've only named 3 players, and I think only Pietrangelo was the only defenseman of those 3 that they named that would actually be on the team. Has anything come out since then, or I haven't seen it?
Not that I know of,
okay.
No.
Yeah, so basically, I was just reading this week's Sportsnet published a piece about speculating about lineups and lines and stuff like that for Team Canada. They had the following 3 defensive pairings. A first pairing of Shea Theodore and Cale Makar, a second pairing of Dougie Hamilton and Alex Pietrangelo, and a third pairing of Morgan Riley and Aaron Ekblad, who's having a monster season in Florida. So if you're with your third pairing is Morgan Riley and Aaron Ekblad, that's a hell of a defensive core. As usual, Team Canada is extremely stacked. Bubble defensive candidates include Chabot, obviously, Devin Taves, Chris Letang, Mackenzie Weegar, Darnell Nurse. And I say this as, Thomas Chabot is my favorite player on this team. I have a Chabot jersey. I love the guy. I don't see a path for him. This defensive core is it's too stacked. I mean, the only person he could edge out of here on current form would maybe be Morgan Riley. And I mean, I would put Devin Taves in there first, or Mackenzie Weegar. Or even Darnell Nurse. So unfortunately, I don't really see a path for him. If he was of any other nationality, he'd probably walk onto the team. But it's Canada. I mean, like, we are ludicrously deep in every position. I mean, what can you do?
Yeah. I mean, in my personal opinion, I think Chabot probably just doesn't stand out as much as Morgan Riley because of the market he's in. But I personally think you look at Thomas Chabot, he has been a complete defenseman this year. He has dominated offensively. Yes, he's had a few defensive gaffes, but overall he's looked very solid defensively, shutting down Nathan McKinnon the other night, especially on that one rush where Nathan McKinnon tried to beat Chabot on the outside and Chabot managed to stay with him and poke-check the puck to the corner. Like, he was looking good, and Nathan McKinnon is no slouch. That's a hard player to play against, one of the best in the league. So, I think Thomas Chabot, in my mind, definitely beats out Morgan Riley. Now you're talking about Uyghur, Nurse. There's other guys on there who you could really pencil in as getting that 5th, 6th spot. But I genuinely think that if Thomas Chabot, if the abilities that he shows out on the ice were translating to a few more points out there this year, he would be a lock. Or if he was on Toronto, that's my personal opinion. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, two things, taking off my Sens fan hat and putting on my Canada fan hat. I think there's maybe like a lot to be said for just taking that top line from Florida, and like that top pairing of Florida of like Uyghur and Ekblad, just make that a stupid third pairing would be great. And taking off the Canada hat and putting the Sens hat back on. Honestly, the guy is playing 30 minutes a night. Is it the worst thing in the world to give him fucking 3 weeks off in the middle of the season? Watch some Netflix, have an ice bath, like fucking take care of himself for a bit before DJ Smith throws him into the fucking trenches again as soon as he comes back. I don't hate the idea of Chabot not making the team because like he's underappreciated by the rest of the league, and him getting to just rest up and chill and have a bit of a break during the season. The last thing we want is to send him into the Olympics. He gets injured, and then our season, which is already off the rails, flies even further off the rails and ends up in like a pit of lava or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bennett's used up our amount of swears that we're allowed to have per month. So there's that.
You love to see it. Yeah, I mean, I agree that I think his path is going to be a little more difficult. If he continues to play the way he has, I think he has a legitimate case. But you're right. Would a couple weeks off from being the most played NHL D-man in the league is a bad thing? No, not at all. So if he plays, great. We have something to look forward to for Canada games because they're going to win. And if he doesn't, then we can just enjoy the show and get to see Germany and our young son Jimmy and our American father Brady.
And on that note, thanks everyone for listening to this week's episode. We appreciate you. Thanks for checking us out. Not in that way, you pervs. No, I'm just kidding. Bad joke, I know. Get me out of here.
Oh my God.
You can find us everywhere, I guess, on social media, Reddit, Discord, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the stuffs. Find us on there. Find us on YouTube at the Senstennial Podcast. Thank you for listening, and go Sens Go.
Go Sens Go, I guess.
I guess.
Go Sens Go, I guess.